I started my glass pad journey with the Cerapad 3.0, and despite loving that product, I found that it was just a little bit too fast for me and I didn't possess the skills required to make the most of it. So I moved on to a pad that had a touch more control with the Razer Atlas. And this is the pad I've been using up until recently, and I found it really quite balanced. My community have now suggested that I try the Cerapad Kin from TJ Exclusives. I've been testing it for about 2 weeks. I've got past the break-in period. It's really unique. Can't wait to get into the details of the review, and I hope you enjoy this one too. So a couple things up front. I bought this pad with my own money, but I am affiliated with TJ Exclusives, and if you choose to buy one, you can use code LogPile on their website for a discount. I want to get straight into how this pad feels to use. And the surface is actually made of ceramic, which is an entirely different material to the wider glass pad market. There's a link to a post explaining this in more depth in the description below. And when the Kin arrived, it felt like it had a lot of depth to the surface, and this is a really unique feature for a hard pad because typically hard pads are hard. My observation of the surface, feeling like it has depth, is that it felt a bit chalky, like there was a thin layer of dust on the surface. And I would say it's like a chalky, hybridy, rubberish feeling. And it felt quite sticky as well. And this feeling translated to something you could actually feel in game too. So that sticky, textured, chalky, rubbery feeling on the surface translates to a sensation similar to mouse acceleration. It feels like you're running a couple of different sensitivities. And what I mean by that is if you put light pressure on the surface when you swipe, you get a really fast glide, but the more pressure you apply, the more it bites into the pad. And I found that it's quite a significant difference that you get from applying pressure. So as an example, during a swipe to get your mouse onto target, you apply light pressure and it moves very fast. When your cursor's on target, you then press into the pad, and that stops your mouse from wriggling around like it sometimes does on other hard pads. You can really lock onto what you're aiming at by doing it this way. And it's quite a unique experience and it's quite fun. This is a bit of a polarizing feature of the pad though, because I sometimes involuntarily apply pressure to my mice when I'm under pressure, and this increases or changes the experience with the pad in terms of the friction you feel by quite some margin. In some movements, it can feel like a fast speed pad, like a sky pad, and in other movements, it can feel like a muddy cloth pad, depending on how much pressure you apply. Means it just feels a bit inconsistent at times. The pad is much more consistent after the break-in period, while also managing to retain some of those depth qualities I've already mentioned. It still holds higher static and dynamic friction than other pads on the market, but it's generally faster than a typical cloth pad, and I have some clips up on screen now to demonstrate this. I found that with the higher levels of initial friction and additional depth of the pad, my 42cm sensitivity didn't feel quite right. The micro adjustments were very inconsistent, so I lowered my sensitivity significantly to 51cm, and I found that my overall experience on the pad had greatly improved. I found that the texture on the surface had less of an unwanted impact on my aim in terms of levels of friction and stickiness, and my enjoyment on the pad skyrocketed as a result. I've been talking to Venom about his experience too, and his stream is also linked in the description below. His thoughts were that running a higher sensitivity on the Kin makes sense for him because of the control it offers. It makes the higher sensitivity much more manageable. I think it is important to acknowledge different experiences, which is why I mention his thoughts too. The size of the pad accommodates this lower sensitivity too, and there are lots of different options you can buy on the TJ Exclusives website, but I went for the 505mm by 405mm option, and it sits really nicely on my desk. There's surface area for days on this thing, and I haven't ever felt like I needed more room to play on. The build quality is mind-blowing too. It's absolutely solid, and if I was to get burgled, the Cerapad Kin would be a solid choice of weapon. I also put my gamer tag on the bottom right-hand side of the pad too. This was free of charge. If there's anything that could make me bond more with the product, it's free customization options. I love this. I'd love to see more of it in the gaming industry. Great job, TJ Exclusives. I chose the green color for my pad because I don't have any green mouse pads yet, and, well, I like green, and it turned out brilliant. It is really pretty to look at. They've made some adjustments to this revision of the Cerapad kin to increase the durability and control it offers, and they've basically just infused some metal flakes into the surface, which gives it a really cool shimmering effect when you look at it in the light. When it's not in the light, I find my eyes struggling to focus on it. It feels like some sort of optical illusion. Everything just looks a bit fuzzy, and it's really cool. But that's the effect the metal has. It also appears to have some sort of functional use too, because the pad is really very controlled. The pad isn't too tall on my desk either, and it has a similar feet configuration to the SkyPad, except the Cerapad kin doesn't flex so noticeably as a SkyPad, and I think this is because the kin is so thick and strong. The corner feet on the Cerapad kin also function very well. I haven't noticed the pad moving around on my desk as I play. The mouse feet you use on this product will make a huge difference to how it feels to play on. I find the bigger the skates you use, the more friction and feedback from the pad you get. And the difference here is so clear to me that I think if I was blindfolded, I could tell you if the mouse I was using had small, medium or large skates installed. I haven't done too much testing with reference to mouse feet brands, but I have used the X-Ray Pad Obsidian dots, the Tiger Ice dots, the Tiger Ice skates, and some other PTFE sort of default options on things like the MZ1 and the X-Lite V2. The biggest differentiating factor for me was the size of the skates that I used. If you've enjoyed the video so far, please don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you in the comment section below if you have any questions. I'd love to see you down there. So to tie this into my previous benchmarking exercise that I've done for the Pulsar Superglide, the SkyPad 3.0 and the Razer Atlas, I'd offer the Cerapad kin the following scores. I'd give it a 6.5 for speed, mostly to represent the difference you can get from the friction on the pad. I'd give it a 9 for control because it really is very controlled, gives you a lot of feedback from the pad, which I personally really enjoy. I'd give it a 7.5 for tracking, and I'd give it a solid 9 for clicking. I'd suggest this pad is perfect for those of you that are cautious to step into the hard pad market. It serves as a somewhat hybrid approach between cloth and hard pads itself, and while the kin doesn't score particularly high for tracking, I use it predominantly for tracking games, and I personally have really enjoyed using it. I will be comparing the Razer Atlas and the kin more thoroughly later in the video. The pad isn't too bad in terms of maintenance either, and I typically would just use a microfiber cloth just to wipe it down at the start of a session. And if I don't feel anything too scratchy throughout that session, which is quite often the case with the Cerapad kin, it's not too frequent you need to wipe it down, I would just forget about it then until my next play session. In terms of how this pad feels on your skin, I really dislike the feeling. It's really sticky, and it's the worst of all of the glass pads that I've tried. In my opinion, it's pretty much essential to use a sleeve with this one. The surface also seems to make me sweat, even when it's not that hot. So I use my Carpio G 2.0 or a sleeve every time I use it, even when I work, which I haven't had to do with my other glass pads. And I do this just because I dislike the feeling so much. You know, again, taking you back to that chalky and rubbery feeling. There's never been a better time to buy a Cerapad kin. TJ Exclusives have done a brilliant job delivering products that gamers want. Because of their success, they've been able to bulk buy some of their materials. This has allowed them to drop their prices, which makes it more affordable. It was quite expensive when I bought mine. I'd suggest if you use a content creator code, it will reduce the cost even more, and therefore it's a really solid recommendation. And if you're a cloth pad user that wants the convenience of a gloss pad without the ungodly speed they generally offer, then this is the way. If TJ Exclusives could somehow break in the pad during their production process, I think this would improve the overall experience for their new consumers. I asked TJ Exclusives through Twitter how they get that depth feeling on the surface, and they replied stating that it's simply just the properties of ceramic. This pad isn't just another SkyPad clone like so many others we've seen in recent months. Due to the experience it offers, it is its own thing, in its own category of awesome. It's a hard pad with cloth pad properties, which I think is an insane feat of engineering. Or magic. It's probably magic. As a comparison between the Razer Atlas and the Cerapad kin, I find the Razer Atlas to feel more open in its properties. Your movements aren't hindered in any way by the texture of the surface, and it's always the same level of friction that you receive regardless of how much you press down on the mouse. And this makes the Atlas a more consistent experience. The Kin is way more controlled and also more inconsistent, which is a weird combination of words to use in the context of mousepads. I actually prefer the Atlas for this reason, but the Kin isn't far behind the Atlas, and I'll explain now why the Cerapad Kin will remain on my desk for the foreseeable future. In my experience, a speed glass pad will exaggerate the issues with a mouse design, especially if you use that mouse in fingertip grip like me. Now that I use glass speed pads on a daily basis, I find that I can no longer use my favorite mice. Because of the way their design flaws are exaggerated on a speed surface, I no longer find them enjoyable or that same thrill of using them as I used to on a cloth pad. The biggest benefit I find with the Kin in comparison to the Atlas is that the overall slower speed, higher levels of control offered by the Kin allows me to use my favorite mice again. So two examples of this are the MZ1 Wireless, which has really weird weight balancing issues, and the HSK Pro, which I find to be too low on the stability scale to use on a fast glass pad. With the Cerapad Kin, I can use whatever mouse I want to in my collection, and that's the reason it's going to stay on my desk for now. The other thing to consider if you're in the market for a glass pad that leans more towards control, so the Razer Atlas or the Cerapad Kin, is that TJ Exclusives are a company consisting of 3 people. Razer has over 1,400 employees, and during my recent testing for my Razer Atlas review, I reached out to Razer to get some clarification on the coating that they'd applied to the Atlas, and they gave me a really stiff ignoring. I got full sent, ghosted. In contrast to the Razer experience, when I was doing my testing with the Cerapad Kin for this review, I reached out with a few questions to TJ Exclusives to ask them how they manage certain things, and I got immediate responses every time, and a little bit of chit chat about gaming more generally. TJ Exclusives are passionate about their product and their company, and if I had to choose one of these products for the rest of my life, say you were holding a gun to my head, please don't do that, by the way, I would choose to support a small company's dream who happen to be full of passion and providing genuine innovation for the industry. This, combined with my previous points on how fun I found the Cerapad Kin to use, means I would choose the Kin every damn time. Okay, thank you, bye.